class. Hello class, and welcome to the last section of the Poem of the Cid. Here we'll be looking at the final few moves that our characters make, but really we'll talk a little bit more about the story this time than we have in other guides. So this canto starts off in Valencia, the Cid city. The princes of Carrion came with the Cid and their new wives, the Cid's daughters, back to Valencia at the end of the second canto to try to impress the Cid. I don't know if any of you have father-in-laws or have met your respective significant other's parents, but yeah, it's kind of you want your father-in-law to think well of you as a man, and in the world of medieval Spain, that means you have to prove your bravery in combat. Unfortunately, for the princes of Carrion, they're not particularly brave fellows. There's a story that like the first kind of episode that happens in this canto is that the princes, have what I think is the very sensible reaction of being freaked out when a lion gets loose in the Cid's castle, which the Cid, superhero that he is, goes and grabs the thing by the scruff and throws it back in its cage. Again, that's probably an exaggerated, made-up story that I very highly doubt that happened. But still, kind of the first thing that this canto hits us with, these guys are cowards. And, for a book that, looking into the politics of when it was written and who it might have been written by, has been favoring the Cid, quite a bit the whole time, this is, like, the most kind of vicious and partisan chapter of the book, that the author really has it out for these princes of Carrion and, like, doesn't let them do anything good this whole time. So, they prove themselves cowards with the lion. They later prove themselves cowards again in battle. There's yet another Moorish army that appears outside Valencia. Once again, the Cid needs to go fight to defend his territory, and this time he brings his new sons-in-laws along with him, and kind of sends them off to serve different parts of the battle line. And both of them run away from combat. One has one of the Cid's knights, he kills a Moor, brings it back to one of the princes and says, "Here, I killed this guy, for you. Say that you did it. Here's this horse as proof. And if anyone asks, I'll back you up." So, they're trying to be nice to their new family members. They're not particularly impressed by them. And later on, when they get back to the castle, after the victorious battle, there is some joking around that goes that, hey, where were these guys? Or, they did such a heroic job when really no one saw them do anything good. So the two princes are established as cowards, and because of this, they get in their heads that they need to defend their masculinity. And the way that you do this, in medieval Spain, many other cultures and times throughout history, arguably even today, if your masculinity is questioned, you have to defend it with violence. It's an important kind of side effect of, or it's an unfortunate component of masculinity. It is interesting to see just how often it shows up, again, across how many cultures have this reaction. But, that's how it manifests itself here in this story. So throughout we've seen violence and masculinity linked together. Now the princes have to look for an opportunity to use violence to prove themselves as men. They can't fight anyone else because they're terrible at fighting. So they get the brilliant idea in their heads that we're going to beat the Cid's daughters, and that will, be fair payback to the real and imagined insults that they feel that they've received from the Cid and his followers. So the book traces out the route that the princes take back to try to get to Corpez. After the battle, the princes say, well, we're going to take our wives home now. Now that we've proven ourselves in combat, it's time to go home. So, again, as usual, a list of places, going through the mountains. Again, probably trying to, rather than going straight through the mountains, it looks like they were trying to skirt the outside. Another sign of the prince's cowardice, when they stop at Molina, they meet the Cid's friend, Abengalbon, the Moor, and they plan, hey, because this guy's a Moor, we can get away with killing him. Abengalbon kind of figures out what's going on and decides to leave. it doesn't give himself, doesn't put himself in a position to be assassinated. But again, it shows that these guys are, this he, Ben Gelban is held up as a good Moor, as a faithful friend and servant to the Cid, so that these guys would, betray this guy, would hurt this guy, even though he's a good guy, is not a, great mark for their characters. In this section, on the way to and on the way out of Molina, there's an interesting note, or there's a couple interesting lines in the story, that the knights that accompany the princes and the Cid's daughters are described as they fall to tilting along the way. Ben Gawain's knights do mock battle as they leave, on the road home from the prince's campsite. So it's this interesting thing that these knights, if you give them any kind of free time, fall into violence, even if it's pretend fighting, mock battles or tournaments, which is what they mean by tilting. It's going to be jousting, is the more common term that we would use today. They always have to be fighting. They always need to be doing something. They're practicing their skills. They're showing off again their prowess as knights. And again, this mock combat, as we've discussed in some other places, can be dangerous. People do get killed jousting. They get killed in these mock battles or melees. If not killed, then certainly injured. Even if it's comparatively little things that wouldn't, put someone in the hospital by their standards, breaking teeth, getting a concussion. And so this is it's a constant kind of violence and bloodshed that these guys live in. So, some more mock battles, and we have the route continues. It's interesting around here. It mentions that they passed Griza on their left. And we're not really, no one's really quite sure where Griza is. It's kind of thought to be around here, Riaza. It's a similarly named town. But parts of this canto don't always make sense geographically. For example, mentions that they stop at San Esteban and then proceed to the Wood of Corpez. Well, there's several towns through here called San Esteban. This is San Esteban de Guarmaz is the largest one. So I kind of picked one that I think might make the most sense as far as where they ended up. But so they come through this region, which is tremendously mountainous and hilly. So see how kind of broken up it is. So they pass through here, and now they're getting pretty close to the prince's home territory at Carrion, and they're certainly at this point closer to Carrion than they are to Valencia. So just past San Esteban, the princes dismiss all their servants and guards so that they can enjoy themselves with their wives. So reading between the lines, hey, get out of here, guys. We want to get laid. We don't want an audience. Certainly, the marriage must have already been consummated at this point. These guys have been married for quite some time. This trip, the route from Valencia to Corpez, is about 300 miles. So, there's been plenty of alone time. So, there's not, well, if a marriage is not consummated in the medieval world or under modern law, there's grounds to kind of annul it and say that it never happened. That's not quite what the princes are trying to do here. They do agree that they're married to these women. They are certainly more than happy to accept the dowry that came with them. But still, they need to, by beating and abandoning their wives, they're showing that they, expressly are kind of ending the marriage. And the fact that they leave them for dead is part of that. So again, it's mentioned that they leave them in some fierce mountains in a wood. Again, somewhere in this valley is the Wood of Corpez. At least, again, there's no, I guess historians have struggled a little bit to figure out exactly where that is, but Spain has placed a historical marker in this town, Castelleo de Robledo. So, somewhere in these woods, on one side of the town or the other, the princes strip their wives naked. So there is an element of sexual humiliation in here. Beat them, and then continue on their way back to carry on, kind of saying that they've their wives died on the journey. Fortunately for the girls, the Cid had sent some knights to trail the prince's party. He didn't fully trust the princes. That ended up being a very good idea. They find the girls naked in the woods, and they bring them back to Valencia. And again, the book spends some time describing the route home. That's not as important. So they go back there, and now the Cid, is obviously pretty furious at what has happened. He's angry both at the princes, but also at the king. Remember that this marriage was the king's idea. The king okayed this and had this more or less as a condition to bring Cid back into his kingdom. So this, did not go as planned for King Alfonso. So the Cid demands justice. The king realizes that he's had a major problem on his hands. That if he doesn't give the Cid some kind of justice, this guy could start a war, and he's certainly proven himself to be a great warrior. And he holds a major city, and has a lot of friends. So this is not a guy that the king particularly wants to piss off. So King Alfonso orders a court held at Toledo, near the center of Spain, and conveniently, pretty much on neutral ground, fairly equidistant from Burgos to Valencia, which is again the Cid's stronghold. So the court meets at Toledo, and the princes realize they're in trouble. The girls are alive. They have the marks of the beating that they received. They can't really say, oh, we didn't do it. Or, even if they said that someone else came and did this to them, well, then where were they? What kind of men would they be to abandon their wives? So they adopt their legal defense here is basically give the Cid whatever he wants. Anything that will avoid them having to fight a duel. So the Cid comes in, again, he brings his knights and people. The princes have their supporters at the court. And the king sits as judge, and he has a couple of other judges with him. One of them is Count Ramon from Barcelona, who the Cid had defeated earlier in the text. He's at that Frankish city up there. So this guy might have some grounds to have beef, if you will, with the Cid. But again, the Cid also treated him well when he was a captive. So he's felt to be someone that he's a friend of the Cid, but also has lost him in battle. Not a bad guy to have or on the court. Though in modern thinking, he probably would have had to recuse himself for some of those same complications. So the court meets. The Cid says, "All right, I gave you guys 1,000 marks of gold as a dowry. I want that back." And the princes say, "Oh, well, we can't really give it back. We spent it all." So the king says, "All right, fine. I'll give back the bit that they gave me, because again, it's always good to grease the king. Any kind of payment that you get. Bribery is such a harsh word, but make sure that the king's taken care of." So the king says, "All right, fine. I'll give back the money that they gave me. I will cover the rest of it. I'll make that up by seizing 1,000, 3,000, the corresponding value in land from the prince's holdings at Carrion." So that's taken care of. The Cid gets his money back. And the Cid said, "I gave you my 2 swords, Tizon and Colada, those Damascus steel swords, that he'd captured in battle from Moorish kings. He gave one to each prince." And say, "Okay, that's fair. Have your swords back." So the Cid gets that. And the princes now think, all right, we've given back everything that he gave us. We gave back his daughters, who princes from Navarre and Aragon, 2 other kingdoms in Spain, then come to the court and ask to marry these girls. So they went from being the daughters of who started this adventure as a minor knight, goes to become kind of a king in his own, or a king or lord in his own right. Now his daughters will be princes that the princes will have to show. Or his daughters will be princesses of separate kingdoms that the princes will have to show all due respect to. So there's a line in there that you beat them as wives, now you'll have to bow to them as queens. So they think they're off the hook, and then the Cid finally says, you've drawn my daughter's blood, I want blood in return. And this causes some shouting, kind of a shouting match in the court. The king says, all right, the king is completely on Cid's side in all this again. He's trying to keep this guy happy. He says, all right, you want to fight? We will have a fight. We will schedule a formal duel to be held. The princes say, not right now. The princes don't want to fight it at Toledo, and they certainly don't want to fight it right then. So, as a way to make them happy, the king says, all right, fine, we'll have it back at Carrion, back where the princes are from. And I don't know... Oh, here it is. Okay. Resolution. So somewhere in these fields, through 3 weeks after the court at Toledo disbands, there's a fight here. Now what's interesting is that the Cid goes from Toledo back to Valencia. He's not here. He's not one of the guys that fights this duel with the princes. And that's a little unusual. That's, again, for someone that is apparently a tremendously proficient warrior who has slaughtered thousands of Moors over the course of the story. Why isn't the Cid here? Could it be? He's getting up in age. One single combat is a young man's game. Does he not want to try his luck against much younger men? Maybe it's that he's going back to Valencia so that if anything odd happens, to his guys, the 3 champions that he sends out, if they should suddenly fall ill, if they get struck by lightning, on their way to Carrion, the Cid might be going home to be able to raise an army to come and settle things that way. It's unclear why the Cid doesn't go, but that's my guesses as to why he's not there himself at this trial. So the trial occurs. There's 3 separate combats: the 2 princes and then another supporter, that kind of a cousin of theirs that came to their defense and insulted one of the Cid's knights at Toledo. So they settle it out on the field there. And again, of course, the Cid's guys win. Of course, the fight is not even particularly close. And even looking at how the author describes what happened in these battles, he mentions repeatedly that the Cid's knights struck through the boss of the prince's shields, or their opponent's shields. That's the kind of circle bit in the middle. Basically the strongest part of the shield. So they hit so hard, they went right through the middle of the shield and then pierced, the limbs or the armor of the guys standing, or the guys that they were fighting. Interestingly, no one gets killed. That shows that the armor that these knights wear. This is even before they're wearing full plate. But in pretty determined single combat, none of these people actually end up getting killed. The one that has the most severe injury mentions that one of the shirts of mail that he's wearing several, which is interesting. Has his armor pushed in. I think they said a hand's breadth, kind of into his chest, by the head of a lance. So again, as I think this is mentioned elsewhere, but you'd wear some kind of padded garment and then put the chainmail over it. So he hit with such force that the chainmail got pushed through the padded shirt and into the guy's body. Ow. But so, end of the day, the good guys win. Everyone gets their money back. The girls go on to live honorable lives as queens, and the Cid, remains down in his own personal kingdom in Valencia. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed. Again, any questions, please ask in the discussion forums on the Class Blackboard site.